Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our new episode for Pivot in Progress. Today, we have a very interesting topic lined up, which is how do you return to work after you've had a career gap? And one of the things we have realized at Pivot is that career gaps are today far more common than what most people think. And unfortunately, though, many people still approach them with a lot of sort of hesitation and don't really know exactly how to position themselves. And there's a lot of bias in the job market as well against such professionals. So we have two brilliant experts and speakers today with us. They're both backstage. I'll be bringing them up here just in a matter of seconds. But the goal is going to be not just share theory, but provide really tangible, actionable steps that you can apply and hope to achieve your career goals in the near future. So, without further ado, I will be bringing both the speakers up here. All right. Okay, great. So, we have Runam and Richa. Welcome both again. How are you doing?
We're doing well.
Thank you so much.
Well, great to have you both, and thanks for making time. Really appreciate it. So let's start with a quick round of intro. I think there's obviously a lot to cover here, so I'll just quickly share for people who don't know me. I'm Arjun. I'm the founder at Pivot, and I've worked in US and India for approximately total of 15 years, primarily within HR and the career space. Earlier, I used to help organizations meet their talent strategy and talent objectives. For the last 5, 6 years since I've started Pivot, I've been helping the individuals achieve their career goals. And really, I feel sort of very grateful, very fortunate to be in this space because of the amount of support that people need in today's fast moving, rapidly changing world. So we'll talk more about Pivot. We'll talk more about the main topic of the day. But I'll turn it over to the speakers. So we'll start with Runam. Runam, welcome again. And if you could just tell us briefly, what you have been up to in the recent past of your career and what you do today, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So I'm basically a business leader in the health tech industry, a trained physiotherapist myself, but my career diverged quite a bit, and I ended up on the business side. What I'm currently doing is I'm leading operations for BioPeak. BioPeak is a chain of longevity clinics. Our first two clinics are up in Bangalore, and well, I run the client operations for them. So that's me.
Okay, perfect. And Richa, please go ahead.
I'm Richa Mahindra, and compared to these two, I think I am most antique and almost with my leg in the this thing. So I have almost 30 years of work experience. I am a ICF certified MCC coach, and I started my own organization in 2013. Prior to which, I was the hub HR head for a large telecom organization. I've been through sales, marketing, and now we are using HR as a lever to achieve business results. We work both in SMEs and in the corporate. And this topic is very dear to my heart because one, I know it's going to help a lot of people. And second, starting your own enterprise is almost like returning to work. New challenges, new things to scale up. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And thank you, Arjun, for having me here.
Absolutely. Thank you again for making time. So let's get started. And I just want to kind of dive right into it because the number one bias in the market right now is this, which is folks who have career gaps on their profile are, for whatever reasons, considered like they have lesser capabilities than people who don't have a gap in their profile. So gap almost equates to capability, which in our view is a very biased way to look at it, but it is supremely deeply entrenched in the current ecosystem. So I want to start with that particular notion because whether we agree or disagree with it, it exists. So can we start by understanding how do recruiters and hiring managers typically view people who have gaps in the profile today? What is that specific bias like? And why do people have that bias? Let's start with that, and then we'll talk about the solutions and ways that perhaps you both have helped others navigate such situations after that. Runam, we'll start with you if that's okay.
Of course. Well, you're right, actually. Arjun, the bias does exist. A gap is looked at pretty negatively, and especially if it's a woman who has a gap on her CV, the assumption is that she's not committed. So capability, which you've mentioned, is one part of it, and commitment is another part of it, and both of these are viewed to be lesser than in other individuals. Why does this exist? I think it's just I think in India we're still not multifaceted, right? We're very unidimensional. So there's a specific sort of ladder or hierarchy of things that you're supposed to do, and once you enter the workforce, you're supposed to essentially keep working. Jumps actually from organization to organization, interestingly, are not viewed as negatively. People understand that that's for growth, but gaps instead are viewed very, very differently. It's a little different, I think, in the West, and you'll know more, Arjun, with your experience, and maybe even Richa. But I think that people are rewarded for being multifaceted, whereas that's not yet the case in India. However, I think it's a little different. At least that's the hope. I think it's a little different in smaller organizations and startups where when we're so hungry for talent and struggling to attract the right kind of talent. I think we're more open to people who come in and demonstrate an interest or a hunger to work with us. I think we're a little more willing to sort of take a chance on people, but often there is an impact on the compensation that's offered. I can't run away from that fact.
Yeah, no, very true. I think the point around, East versus sort of West or India versus the West, I think that's a very relevant point. I definitely have seen that, Runam, that there's a little more appetite in the West to not just be open towards multifaceted careers, but have that understanding that people have to take a gap in their careers. And I think even the West has evolved in this regard over the recent past. It's not been like this forever. I remember actually, so the first firm, I'll just quickly share this anecdote before turning it over to Richa. Where when I first joined my first company in back in 2011, and the founder of the firm, who was almost in his late 60s, early 70s, he started that firm back in 1973 or 74, and at that time he had only employed women most of the time because for the lack of a better reason, it was primarily pay oriented, and women expected less pay compared to men, especially in those times. But one thing he did, and he was very proud of, is he made sure that whatever flexibility women needed, especially when they became first time parents, he made sure that he provided them that,
Hmm.
going against the trend of those times. And there were very, very few companies that were doing that at that time. And long story short, today US is in a place where you will see majority of companies actually being very open to come to women and men who are taking maternity and paternity leaves. We see some of the tech companies there giving 3 to 6 months even for paternity leave. So it's a much more, I would say, mature ecosystem from that standpoint. But yeah, Richa, over to you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so while I agree with this divide between East and West, I'd like to come up with another aspect to this entire thing. So in India, it's a reality, So there was this report by Times of India which said that 80% of Indian women took career breaks and 45% of them cited it as childcare and personal commitment. And then there was a time when the ILO said that this whole thing about career gaps is a gender inclusion issue. But very recently, I saw a report in the Guardian Life which said that 57% of men are now supporting women in caregiving. So my perspective is slightly different because now career gaps are sort of more accepted. And but still the bias is there that 1 out of 5 recruiters will be biased against the career gap. Why this gets intensified and we feel all of these things, where there is the statistics I was reading because my daughter goes to Ashoka. So there was the study that Ashoka did that 48% women who've taken breaks do not get a call back.
Hmm.
The point is that now most of the hiring is bulk hiring. and the recruiters are using ATS and AI based platforms. So what really happens is that they are doing the screening, and the recruiter finally spares a few seconds on profiles. Now again, these ATSs and AIs are built on human learning and on our prejudices. To add to your point, Runam, that prejudice does exist. So actually they screen out in those stages people who have taken breaks.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel now the thing has slightly changed people's worldview towards breaks. So I myself was doing recruitment for an IT firm, and this was almost 10 years back. And the candidate they shortlisted had taken a break of 3 months. I was helping with the search because we also have an executive search firm, and I couldn't wrap my mind around it that why are they going for this candidate. So all said, I feel now people do not expect 100% linear careers, and this is a huge hidden talent pool that is there. So whilst all of what both of you said is true, it is also true that people's perceptions are now changing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid point. The other thing that I wanted to understand from both of you before, we move on to the next part of this discussion is, I mean, the job market also plays a very significant role in how recruiters and companies' biases are actually applied within the job market. So, for example, if it's a very competitive market from a candidate perspective, wherein you're competing with 500 other candidates for each opening, it becomes very hard to for this candidate to say that even though I may have the right skills and experience, I should be hired, because there might be 50 other candidates at least out of that 500 who also have the same skills and experience, but they don't have a gap. And companies end up being biased and going with the less risky kind of candidate, because they feel, Runam, to your point about commitment, they feel the other candidates at least would be more committed, even though they have the same kind of capabilities. Um, in a different kind of job market, like, I don't know if you all recall in 2021 when there was gangbuster hiring happening, and it was a more employee and candidate driven kind of a market, not employer. At that time, everybody, and
Yeah.
whether regardless of your experience, your gaps, it was very employee friendly, and almost everybody was getting an offer within 2-3 months. So what do you think is the role of the job market in this kind of a scenario, especially now that we are seeing a market which is very challenging? You have seen layoffs for now 3 years straight. There's no sign of stopping. Yeah, wanted to get your thoughts on that. Brunam, would you like to
Sure.
go first? Yeah.
I mean, of course, I think I always say this, of course, in a slightly different context, but it holds true here कि market से बड़ा कोई नहीं होता.
Hmm.
So, and I always say this in business context, right? That you can have the best product, but if you're in the wrong market, or if you're
Yeah.
at the wrong time in the right market, right? Then, no one can help you succeed. So I think the same thing holds true. I mean, job market is, at the end of the day, it's a market. It's about demand and supply. And my father's a Marwari trader, right? So he says कि market में जब तेजी होती है, that's when you capitalize on it. So in 2021, the ones who made the right moves, they capitalized on the market. The fact is, after 22 or and 22, 23, the market has been difficult, like you said. And at this time, I think safety, security, looking for a secure place that's not going to lay you off tomorrow is the priority for both the employees, and employers are also going to look for the less risky candidates. But one small point here is, I mean, at least it depends on what you call risk. While people do define gaps as risk, and that's what we are talking about here, to me, a candidate who's sort of shopping from a firm to another, very quickly swapping, to me, that's much more high risk behavior than taking a thought through, structured career gap that probably came up due to whatever, caregiving, child, travel,
Right.
personal growth, MBA. I mean, all these are career gaps, right?
Hmm.
I think I think that is still less risky behavior than this
Yeah.
mindless hopping. I mean, I've been with
Yeah.
you, Pivot, Arjun, for a long time, and I've seen this across the hiring I've done in the last 3 companies I've been with. That if a candidate has switched more than 2 jobs in a yearish, to me
Hmm.
that is a big red flag, and I tend to drill them a lot more on that than any career break.
Right. No, fair point. I think that makes a lot of sense and very well structured, Ranam. I think Richa, what are your thoughts on the job market impacting career breaks?
No, absolutely. The way Runam, expressed it. So it also depends on the leadership thought process and what's really important to the leader. Is it important that they've taken a, so probably an additional filter may be required while
Mhm.
hiring when you are giving an opportunity to somebody who's taken a career break. So again, there are these things. One would be less risk averse who would like to tick all the boxes that this person is up and running, and the day they join my organization they will be up and running. But then the additional risk, like Hunam very nicely pointed out, that they are a very high attrition risk. And what are
Mhm.
they jumping for really? Is it that they are unable to adapt to new environments? Because anyone who is demonstrating organic growth is somebody who is demonstrating the behaviors that are required by the organization. So that becomes a very very important point. And also the person who's coming back, just looking at what they've been doing. So
Mhm.
was it an unthought of break that was thrust upon them, or was it something that they scheduled according to their priorities and what they felt was important to them as a whole person? And what
Mhm.
did they really do with that time? Is it that they really hung up their boots and now they're back because, a very typical example, now my children are grown, they don't need me, or I was looking after an ailing parent, now somebody else has come to support me. So all those things become very, very important. So, yeah.
Yeah, one point that I want to actually extract from that insight you shared, Richa, is the voluntary versus involuntary sort of gaps that happen. Um, Sometimes it's a gray area, it's partially voluntary, partially involuntary as well. But because of layoffs, we are seeing more and more involuntary gaps being thrust upon people, as opposed to earlier, which were slightly more voluntary in nature. So when you are in this kind of a situation where it's not your own call, but at the same time you have to go through that gap,
Yeah.
you have to understand what will help you maximize your productivity, or like however your perception, the optics of that gap is. That is becoming more of an important topic, because earlier you
Yes.
would have, okay, I'm going on maternity or paternity leave, I'm taking care of an ailing parent. Those are very specific reasons, very understandable reasons. Today, there is this stigma around, oh, you were involuntarily laid off, so it wasn't even your call. And that somehow associates to people's performance and capabilities again. Wanted to get both of your thoughts on that. Like when you are in an involuntary gap situation, um, first question a lot of people ask us is, hey, should I be candid about this? Or should I say something else to make it seem like I was not laid off? Um, obviously, we have a specific way of answering, but I'm interested in your thoughts here. Bruno?
Sure. I
Yeah.
mean, amazing question. Actually, I love this one. And my response to that, whenever I'm asked this question, is to always be candid, because when you go around the bush, the person on the other side is not an idiot, right?
Mhm.
All know
Yeah.
how to read hands. And, a layoff is only shameful, honestly, if you make it. The fact is,
Yeah.
and anyone who's been on the other side, and all of us have, right? I've unfortunately seen too many layoff cycles in my own short career, and the fact is, most of the time, it's a business call. It's less to do with an individual and more to do with the whole, and that's obviously not always true, but very often, it is about where the organization is in its life cycle, and what the organization's needs are. So I would personally be very, very candid about the situation. Number one, and number two, to answer the other question, Arjun. And after I accepted the invite on this for this forum, I've been thinking about it a lot. And what you do, Richa said this, right? Like what you do with the time, voluntary or involuntary, doesn't matter. You have the same 24 hours in the day. What you do with that time can either compound your growth or completely shatter it,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
One easy thing, honestly. I mean, today is the time
Yeah.
when learning is the easiest it's ever been. And I've got two coaches on honestly on this call with me. It's never been easier to upskill, right? Whether it's voice modulation classes or executive presence or AI, or there's 500 things that you could be learning. Are you doing that? Number one. And number two, it's a strategy that I myself have applied in the past. When I decide where I want to be, which role I want to be in, or which industry I want to be in, I just do deep research and start educating myself and talking about it on platforms, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've had an involuntary gap myself in my career, but I've never had to job hunt.
Hmm.
because you can see it coming. I mean, unless you're absolutely got your head in the sand, you can see it coming, and you can think about where you would like to go next, and you can start learning, upskilling, talking to the right people, and writing about what you know in that industry to attract luck.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, very well said. And one thing that I want to re-emphasize that you said out of everything is, what how you perceive your own gap is how the world will perceive it as well. So
Absolutely.
you kind of define the quality and sometimes even the length of your gap because of that perception. Very, very important point.
Yeah.
Richa, yeah, I think Runam has captured some key insights, but I would like to see if you have any additional.
So a gap is, unfortunately, because still there, like you would spoke in the beginning, the gap still has some sort of a stigma value attached to it. So if you look at a gap, let's call it a piece of luggage at the airport. Now, if it is unclaimed, it's going to raise a lot of red lights, right? So, how you manage that piece of luggage or baggage is important. So, I feel, like Runam so correctly pointed out, you can't lead people up the garden bush because these are experienced people. So let us say if a layoff is happening, everybody knows that in a layoff there are these matrices that HR is going to make, and they're going to try, irrespective of how accurate their assessment is, but in that organization's assessment they would like to first take care of people who are aligned to the values and who are the highest high performers. So that's how a layoff happens. So being candid about it, like both of you said, and labeling it correctly is most important. Now, whether it was a layoff, whether it was a caregiving, whether it was a mental health issue, whatever it was, voluntary or involuntary, labeling it, being candid about it, and accepting it, yes, this is how it was, is what really supports. Because nobody, transparency is, I think, what is going to support candidates.
Yeah, well said. And that's a good segue to the next part of the discussion since we are all talking about this. Is what do you actually do during the gap period, both from a personal and professional angle, is something that is deterministic of the outcomes at the end of the gap period.
Yeah.
Now, we get a lot of questions from Pivot community about the fact that sometimes when they have taken more than a year long gap, or let's say even 6 months, the confidence level drops significantly versus an individual who has had less than 6 month gap. That's one factor or pattern that we have seen. Second is, we have addressed it indirectly, and I would love for us to address it more directly, is that the involuntary gaps, people are a little more I guess they're itching more to get back into the workforce, right? Because it wasn't their decision. While the people who have taken it voluntarily, they have less of an itch. They will take their sweet time. They may not even do many professionally oriented things during the gap, like they might focus on their family or traveling or something like that. So there are these factors that determine what you will actually do, how motivated you are during the gap period to advance career wise, right? Now, taking all of this into account, what I would like to understand from both of you is what is the best way to sort of rebuild your confidence and stay relevant in the, during the gap period for as smooth of a re-entry into the workforce as possible. We'll start with you again. Yeah.
I was
I
about
always wait patiently for Runam to handle the difficult part, and then I come in with the easy one.
Richa gets some time to think. Runam is
well, then
always
she
on the
comes in
spot.
with the very interesting and different perspective to make us think out of the box. But to your question, Arjun, again, I will say confidence honestly is about how you perceive your worth.
Yeah.
And one of the mistakes that I have seen people do, which compounds the confidence issue, and I keep telling people that I talk to through Pivot also not to do this. The minute they go on a career break, voluntary or involuntary, in their heads, they already see
Mhm.
that the money is constrained. They already believe that they're not going to get a job. And they stop investing in themselves.
Mhm.
And we should be doing the reverse. And I'm not talking about going and blowing money in pubs. I'm being very specific and saying this is the time for you to invest in yourself. Whether it means getting a coach, whether it means upskilling, whether it means grooming, whether it means even just paying someone to do mock interviews, for example,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or a platform with, for that matter. But this is the time to invest in yourself so that when you do hit the job market, you one have a clear narrative for what you use this time. Number one, but number two, you're not perceived as needy. See, the itch is not the problem. The itch is great. In fact, I love hiring people who, seem like they really want to work. The hunger is something I love. But if that itch is perceived as desperation, that's when there is a problem. All right. So,
Mm.
uh, I mean, there's a Buddhist story. There's a story where a person loses his job and he goes to a Buddhist monk. And he says, last time I came to you and I was earning 100 rupees and you told me I should give 10% up to charity. Now I've lost my job. Now what do I do? And this guy says, give 20.
Mm.
When in
Sorry,
time
could you repeat
being,
that?
the Buddhist give 20, giving to charity, because the more you
Okay.
give, so that's the Buddhist sort of, and a lot of religions say this, right? The tithing concept. So I'm just
Mhm.
flipping the narrative here, and I'm saying that when you're the lowest is the time to invest in yourself so that you can go out with a confidence. If you go out and you're shaking, and I've seen enough candidates. I mean, I've literally just hired 25 people in the last 3 months, and I've seen enough people come to me with a break. And there's a
Mhm.
clear difference between people who believe that they've used the break well and they add value to the organization, and the ones who come in with just hope.
Right. Right. No. Good point. Richard, what I want to understand from you, I think, Runam covered the confidence part and sort of the, more, I would say, emotional aspects of
Yeah.
how you perceive yourself and what do you do to change that perception during the career break. I think it's very important. But at the same time, there are certain tangible things that people can do to
Yeah.
invest in themselves. Obvious ones
Yeah.
are upskilling, learning new things which are emerging in the market. That is, I would say, a fundamental thing that a lot of people do understand. I want to get your broad take on areas which you have found most effective that people do during their break. Specific actions, specific productive, tangible.
Yeah. So, one thing that I really liked that Runam said about the mindset. So, um, is the screen frozen? Am I audible?
Areas
Yeah.
that you
Okay.
think
So
can
one
help
thing
them
that
not just from.
Runam said beautifully was about the mindset. And when I appeared for my first interview, so many hundred of years back, I told myself that if they don't hire me, it's their loss. And every time I've gone for an important meeting, I've gone in with that, and normally it works well for me. But in addition to mindset, there are certain tangible things that need to be really taken care of. And the writing is very clear on the wall. So, for example, the World Economic Forum has predicted that uh, by 2030, 39 to 44% of skills would have changed. So it's beautiful. So somebody who is taking a break and somebody who is not taking a break, it's a great equalizer. Now everybody's at the same lane. So one, identifying what are those skills. Now I'm talking about hard skills, because now in the last 1 year, almost 85 to 90% organizations are doing skill based hiring. So your ability to develop those skills, and not only develop those skills, when you're taking a break, practice them. There are so many opportunities for taking up freelance jobs and other things.
Mm.
The other very
Mhm.
interesting thing is that there was a research that said that 66% leaders say that they would not hire somebody who is not AI compatible or capable. And the interesting statistics is that only 35 to 40% organizations really invest in training their core teams on AI. So again, a great equalizer. So whether you are in the workforce or you are outside the workforce, you have an equal opportunity to land that plush job. The third
Mhm.
thing is being active on learning platforms, and most importantly, industry forums which are there, so that you know what is happening in the industry. Because some of the key things that we look at now, even at very very entry level, is that what is this person's ability to peer into the future. So If you are doing all of this, rather than this gap becoming the all consuming thing, it becomes a very future focused thing. So it is
Yeah.
also working on your mindset, where I don't feel I'm sitting here twiddling my thumbs doing something that was forced upon me, if it is involuntary or even if it is voluntary, that I had to do it. Being in that mindset, and being in that mindset itself, so upskilling yourself, applying those skills, being on industry forums, making strong profiles, networking correctly, is what one should very meaningfully do during these days, is what I think. This is what I've seen people who come back with stronger job opportunities work on.
Yeah, no, I think all terrific points and very, very practical insights that I think people can really just take away and start applying. Obviously, you'll have to contextualize and sort of customize it for yourself. But at the same time, I think all the 5 points you shared are really, really on point.
May,
Uh,
may I add one thing? May
yeah,
I add
yeah,
one
please.
thing?
Sure.
So, one big challenge that I had when I started my consulting service was that when I was in an organization, whenever I've been in an organization, there was a very structured form of learning and very intense. Whether it was, there were proper IDP journeys, there were a lot of MDPs that were happening. There was a lot that was happening, whether it was for, building competencies or building hard skills. When I started my entrepreneurship journey, that's why I said that some things are very similar to restarting your career. So there were two things. Something as simple as I was out of sync with the current verbiage. What is happening in corporates, I don't
Mhm.
know, because now I'm an isolated person and people are looking up to me to tell them things. How do I tell them? I have no exposure. So two more things that I did, which people can do. So in addition to running my own consulting firm, I do freelance projects with the likes of Mercer, Aon, Ernst and Young. Not too many, at the same time some where I know what's happening, what's current in the market. And obviously being a serial learner, always learning, enrolling in
No.
programs, and that I think helps me even every time I go for a new project that I take.
Yeah.
So similar
Yeah.
for.
That's such a nuance point there, Richa. Like not being current with what's happening in the market, because upskilling doesn't always necessarily mean you suddenly know the, like you said, the lexicon, the verbiage, right? You need to speak the same language that people are speaking, whether it's AI, whether it's your industry specific concepts, etc. And the market keeps changing pretty quickly every few years on this. So I think being in the know, like even talking to a mentor, I think can be very helpful. Somebody who's working in your target space, right? If you're not getting an immediate opportunity to work as a freelancer or something, just as simple as work with either it's a pivot mentor or any mentor you can find in on your own even. That can eliminate that knowledge gap in a fairly expedited manner. I think very, very nuanced point. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is we've been talking about perception, and perception is all about how you want the world to see you, right? How you see yourself first, and then how the world sees you. And a lot of times there's a huge gap also. A lot of times what happens is been able to fix that lack of confidence, or the positive mindset. We've been able to do that, but that doesn't automatically guarantee that you are communicating the same value to the market, right? You have to be able to know how to do it in both words and actual spirit. So I wanted to focus on how do you actually communicate now that value that you feel you bring to the table. We've talked about the perception part for kind of creating your own confidence by doing all of these things that we are talking about. Now the next step, as you are trying to re-enter the workforce. So yes, the question is, how do we make sure we are positioning our profile, our gap, in the way that we actually want to be perceived by the market?
You want me to go first?
Yes.
Yes, as always.
Um, I think two, three things. I mean, broadly, right? One is in my head, you should always sort of contextualize what you're talking about to the job. One common thing I see in all the candidates I talk to, whether it's pivot or otherwise, is everyone has this habit of giving a synchronous sort of narrative of what they did, right? I studied this, I
Yes.
did this. But the thing is, at least for me, after about 30 seconds, I've zoned out because I'm not hearing the relevance to what I'm offering to you. I keep telling, I see Richa's giving me a thumbs up.
I'll
So
give
she's
two thumbs up to that because that is one of the most important points, really. I mean, please go ahead, preach. I mean, Runam,
yeah.
that is
So
really,
I
really
always tell
important.
people to just pick from their vast experience, whatever it may be, numbers, incidents, and proof of work that is contextual and relevant to the job that they're applying for. You're applying for a sales role. I don't need to hear about, maybe the HR work that you did. I mean, you can also talk about the extra experience that you have, but I want to be focused on sales, numbers, growth, channel, hiring, team building that you did, tools that you use. First, talk to me about that, capture my interest, and then you can always talk about the other sort of experience that you have, which adds to your sales experience, as opposed to making each of these sound like linear experiences. How does this particular so I used a very important deal that I had negotiated to get the position of a sales head. I'd
Yeah.
never done sales in my life. And then I was hired as head of sales. But there were these one or two deals that I had led negotiations on, not being the head of sales or anything of that sort. But that context is important. And I keep telling people that you're missing it if you go in a synchronous order. No one wants to hear what you did 12 years ago, after you graduated. It's
Yeah.
it's usually sort of irrelevant. So that's one. The second is, if you spend some time learning and upskilling that Richa was talking about, right? The tangible stuff that you've done. Can you create, and especially today with AI, right? Can you create something that almost becomes like a proof of work? Again, for example, I wanted to enter longevity. I come from device and home care, very different background. I created an app that helps women measure risk for perimenopause. I got 120 people. I'm fortunate I have a good audience on LinkedIn. I got 120 people to fill that in.
Hmm.
While I was talking about how this app is working and how exciting the AI was and what I was learning, Biopeak found me, right? And it was a gap. It was 2 3 months when I wasn't working. I wasn't actively looking, but because the conversation was relevant to what I wanted to
Mm.
eventually
Right.
do, the luck sort of surface area of luck expands. So
Mm.
that's the second thing I would say, that if you spend time learning, put that into context. Talk about how what I learned is going to help me. If you've done confidence building or executive coaching, you talk about how this is going to make you a better negotiator or put you in a room with the CEO so that your boss doesn't have to keep stepping in every time there's a deal to be closed.
Right.
I always tell people, even who come from Pivot, that you've got to do the recruiting manager's job for them. You have to tell them what are the 4 lines that he's going to tell the next guy in order to get you hired. You
Right.
can't make him sift through the 25 things that you've told him and find those 4 nuggets that are going to get you hired.
Yeah, no, so relevant. One of the analogies that I give people, similar to what you were talking about, Runam, that many times when people are asked like what they have done in their career, they have this sort of chronological sort of order of things, and I say, okay, imagine you're buying a product in the market. Let's say you go out to buy a laptop in the market, and you go to any electrical the consumer electronics shop, and you're shown like 10 different products, and you start asking the salesperson like, tell me about this product, and the guy starts telling you, actually this product was first actually experimented with in 10 years ago. Then 9 years ago, we changed this aspect about this laptop, and then we did this, and then we did that, and this is where it is today. I mean, would you actually stay interested in the history and how that product evolved over the 9 years? You would not. You would want to know what are the benefits, what are the alignment areas with what you're looking for right away. Pretty much that's how you make your decision. So why is recruitment any different? And that clicks with people, and I think that's exactly what you're trying to say as well. So very, very important point. Richa, we'll get your thoughts on this as well. Like positioning, how does it really get communicated in the right manner, especially after gaps?
So Rona and you have covered almost everything, and I'll give you just another example of what. So a thing that I hear often as a fractional CHRO or as a assessor, a person is doing a particular role, and in the quest to upskill themselves, they go and do something very unrelated, and then they come back to the line manager and say that now I must be elevated. Why? Because I have done a very prestigious program, completely unrelated, not required in your role, and there is no IGP that's happening. So relevance is the most important thing. And the other thing that's very important, the way you were giving the analogy of what's happened in the past. So I did this 10 years back. I dug a well which fed the fields. It doesn't matter. How future focused are you? How are you aligned to what is now required in the job is what is important. So I think it's all the way relevance. The positioning is all about relevance. Now, at a tactical level, it boils down to, when you are approaching people, using the right keywords, identifying but those are all very tactical things, I think, which anybody can tell people. The basic ideology is the relevance, and
Mhm.
relevance at three levels: the skills that are required. Another very important thing becomes the behavioral competencies. So some of the behavioral competencies that become very, very important in today's scenario are curiosity, learning agility, flexibility, resilience, AI adaptability, and all of these things. So relevance.
Richa, I have a quick follow up on that. So like for example, Runam gave a really good example of her from her own experience of building this app and how it attracted, so many people and ultimately her, future employer. Have you seen any patterns where, when you're upskilling, especially during a gap period, what happens a lot of times is it becomes theoretical because you're taking a course and it's the same course that maybe hundreds or thousands have taken on Coursera, Udemy, on these kind of platforms, right? So you may grab like the fundamental level knowledge, but you're not able to capitalize on that. You're not able to showcase why that's a differentiator for your candidature. What should people do when they are upskilling, especially during gap period, and they don't have very readily available opportunities to apply that knowledge that they have learned? I mean, Runam took matters into her own hands and built an app. Like, that's amazing. And today it's much easier than it was like even 2 years ago. But what are some, I would say, timeless kind of conventional wisdom here that you can share with us, that helps people apply that knowledge and showcase that to stand out in the market rather than just saying, hey, I took this course, which anybody else can do as well.
Yeah, so I'll give you a real example. So what happens is that courses translating into actual skills, in non-technical areas, though I'm from HR, so I mean no disdain when I say that, but still in non-technical areas like HR, uh, recruiters are more sympathetic. Great, you've done this. So I had this very interesting case where we were looking for somebody to head the budgeting department in a fairly mid-sized organization. So we had this person come in. She was a chartered accountant, and she had taken a longish break, 6 to 7 years. But she had a whole series of credentials. I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. So we actually gave her a practical application. We were in the process of that time building the AOP. AOP, not essentially a 12-month thing as it says, but it was a short to medium term tool of planning for around
Mhm.
18 to 20 months for the organization, because this organization was in the process of scaling up. So we gave this person a particular assignment, and it was tough because we had internally been trying to do that. And we actually allowed her free flow, come to the organization, talk to people, and of course there were certain guardrails so that the information would not go out. And believe me, in 3.5 weeks she was able to come out with a completely connected, it was not a proper app, but it was connected Google Sheets. And that's what people can do, that when they are building the skills, being very mindful about how they may be able to apply it. Even in HR, let's say if somebody has done a program on designing Canva, it may be very useful for somebody who is planning to go for employee engagement or employer branding, but it may not be so useful for somebody who is vying for a job in talent acquisition. It may, to some extent, because employer branding. So again, being very focused on where you're going, what is the job you are looking for, job family essentially, what will it entail, what are the current requirements, and studying in line of that. Because I've seen, you are so right, I've seen, even when I was going through my MCC journey, which is a long prolonged journey, with starting with ACC, then PCC and MCC, and I saw leaders also joining this journey, many of them falling out, and many of them seeing the end of this good 5 to 8 year journey, because they were very focused on what they were bringing to the table, and not
Hmm.
a good to have skill.
Right, right. I think Honestly, the good thing about being in the market today, even though it's a very competitive and challenging market, is you have many more opportunities to showcase your skills as opposed to just, adding a course to your resume, or, adding just one line, the kind of skills that you have done. I think the more you can showcase, the more you can demonstrate, make it come off the paper and more palpable and vivid that this is the actual skill that this person brings to the table. I think the higher the chances of actually getting your target job. Let's move on. Let's talk about the next thing that I have here, which is, in my view, a lot of times there are slightly lower hanging opportunities in the market. Like, for example, there are specific returnship programs that certain companies
Yes.
have, which are usually the larger companies, I would say. Um,
Yeah.
and there might be other opportunities which even I'm not aware of. But have you seen areas or companies, sectors where you think folks who have a gap should be targeting their next role? Other example we have seen is a lot of times your ex-manager, if you were on a good rapport with them, they might be your best champion, your best sponsor in the market. So what are these sort of lower hanging fruits which people should take advantage of before they start doing the heavy lifting of networking and outreach and all that stuff? We will start with
Runa.
Um,
Risha this time, actually.
Okay.
Good.
Turn the tables this time. Yeah, let's start with Risha.
Yes.
You really scared me now. But anyways, I'll attempt it. So, like you said, there are some very structured programs, and there was this. It started in a very different phase many years back, where people were addressing the problems that women were not entering the boardrooms, because one of the basic problem was that when they had to uh, relocate trans globally, they found it very difficult for the spouses to find jobs. So a conglomerate of 20 to 25 organizations came together that whenever they were shifting a lady or offering her an opportunity, her spouse or partner, whoever that may be, were given opportunities. It started there, and now there are many organizations like Amazon, Rekindle, JP Morgan. They have a re-entry program, IBM Tech Entry. So these are structured programs that are there. These are the low-hanging fruits, as you would say. In India, particularly Infosys in 24-25 has done, they have hired hundreds of women, who were returning to work in this period. But what I feel the lowest hanging fruit, and I will give you two examples which really stand out about people using their creativity to get back or push their way back into a little offbeat, but one of them is Neena Gupta. So if you remember in 2017, she actually went on Instagram asking for work, and she demonstrated her vulnerability. She said, I'm a good actor, but I'm not getting opportunities because of the life and career choices I've taken. And it really worked, because after that, she came back in Badhai Ho and a lot of other movies. The other one, for example, is Maricom. So, what I'm saying is that one is there are structured things now. Not everyone may be going into Infosys or JP Morgan. Those are low hanging fruits. But one, relying on your own creativity, your personal networks, because again, even if you reach out to, this is a fundamental thing that jo dikta hai wo bikta hai. So even in your current network, whether it is LinkedIn, whether it is other social websites, if you start to be vulnerable, one thing that I've always seen is that if you ask for help, 99% times people will offer you that help. So if you are to reach out, start asking people. uh, in my personal experience, when people come back and say 25 to 30% people are able to get opportunities in this informal way.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's my experience, Ronan.
Got it. Yeah, Runam.
Yeah, I think Richa's covered the most salient one that I wanted to talk about, but I will expand on it. Your own network, right? I personally have found that your network is not just limited to your managers. I think the people that you worked with in the past, which could be your manager, other supervisors, so your manager's colleagues, your peers, because very often the peers would have had their own attrition cycles. They are spread in many different sort of organizations. And if you've had any kind of a front facing role, right? If you're doing vendor management, if you're doing operations, if you're doing sales, you're interacting with the world outside of your organization. on a very, very regular basis. I think all of those people, if you've done good work, assuming you've done decent work, um, hold you in their minds in some degree of regard. And I typically make a laundry list of people who I know I was effective with, good, bad, ugly, but
Yeah.
at least they've seen me be effective.
Hmm.
And I shamelessly reach out to everyone every time I'm looking for a job, saying, hey, moving out, looking for a job, areas of interest or roles of interest, let me know if something happens. Like I said, interestingly, I have never done a formal job hunt because it's always, for me, it's always been either LinkedIn or this sort of expanded network that I'm talking about that has got me the foot in the door and foot into enough doors for something to then sort of become a formal engagement. I think people are shy because, like Richa said, right, you have to show your vulnerability. I think people are either shy or scared or underconfident to even tell people that they're looking out. And some of this is
Yeah.
just in your head, right? Because everyone in a 40-year sort of career is going to go through this 7 to 8 times where they're moving out for a variety of reasons. And this is, I'm saying, a stable career where you're spending 4 or 5 years in one place on average.
Yeah.
So all of us have gone through it. All of us have been in that flux where we're moving out from one position, looking for another. And it's absolutely okay to reach out. In fact, since we're talking about examples, this ex-colleague of mine who worked with me in Porter, which is 3 jobs ago, um, reached out to me a couple of months back, very soft touch, saying, "Hi, how are you doing? Hope you're well. Switching jobs, and I would love to find a way to come back to Bangalore."
Mhm.
We were about to hire someone for a role, and I said, "You know what? You might be a good fit. Let's bring you into the mix." And a month later, she joined
Wow.
just because she sent me a message and the timing was good.
Right. Right.
Happens all the time.
No. Yeah. No. I think great advice. And with that, I think we can get into some of the questions that we are getting from the audience. Um, we have a
Arjun,
question here, which is
just
yeah.
one thing that I just
Mhm.
wanted to underline what Runam said. You know, Runam, what really stood out for me was not mindlessly looking at your network, but the word that you used was very important for me at that moment. People that you were effective with. That's it, Arjun. Won't take more time, but it was a very good learning for me.
Yeah, no, very, very important point. I agree. I think wherever you can identify opportunities which will have a higher ROI, less input, greater output, start
Yeah.
there. And what Runam
Yeah.
said essentially is going to help you do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely. All right, let's bring up this question. It's a slightly longish question. I'll read it. It's a very, very, I think, one of the best questions I've gotten on gaps, which is gaps can come about as a result of various scenarios. Could be voluntary time off to assist family members, involuntary time off as a result of layoff, something we discussed. That said, how should you respond if a gap is a function of several long hiring processes where opportunities have come up? You've been selected to compete, reached sometimes even the final stage, but then did not complete the finish line. In such cases, you now have to search for the next opportunity and go through a lengthy 2 or 3 month hiring process. This can add up to a long gap. How do you address this? Thanks, Don, for asking this very pertinent question in the current job market because a lot of mid to senior professionals are exactly experiencing what he is experiencing. They're getting laid off many a times from their companies, and they have spent 15 years, 20 years in their career already. That hiring is slow. That hiring is not fast. It's not bulk hiring. It's very, very targeted hiring.
Nisha. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time. And you can go through this process like 2, 3, 4 times and still not always, land the opportunity. So it adds up. It could become a 6 month or a 1 year gap very easily. Um, if either of you have a response for Dawn, please feel free to go ahead.
I mean, I'm happy to take this.
Sure.
In my mind, it's like a sales deal, right? It's not done till it's done. So
Yeah.
I would never assume that a process, just because I'm moving, from one level to the next, I would never take this as a done deal, right? In my head, it's always warm. And when it's only warm, warm is not good. Warm just means maybe. When you're dating, it's just maybe yes, maybe no. You don't stop looking. I would say at this stage, ideally, and if you're a senior person, your process has to happen in parallel. right? You may have one warm conversation, but you have to still keep a funnel of cold, warm, getting warmer leads, because this is sales. I mean, I think getting the next job is you selling your skill sets to an organization and ensuring that they value you the same way that you wish to be valued, right? And a good salesperson knows that you never rely on one guy to convert and meet your number. You always keep a funnel open. So if anyone is doing this sequentially, I think that's number one, the problem. Number two, how do you tackle it? Because things can happen, and you may land in this situation. I think I'll go back to what I said initially. You have to be candid. You have to be honest, and you have to say that, this is where I reached and this is where it didn't work. If you know why it didn't work, it's okay to also say why it didn't work. The value didn't match. They found a better suited person. The position closed, whatever it may be. People understand these processes because they're running them themselves. I mean, someone like Richa in a big company would be running a process which is tedious and lengthy, and takes many weeks herself. And as a hiring manager, if someone were to tell her that this is, where I've been stuck, she'd completely comprehend it. So yeah, that would be my two limited
Yeah,
perspectives.
no,
I
I think good analogy. I like this sales
Yeah,
part because again, it goes back to the fact that you're trying to not just. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, you're not just trying to kind of land a job, but you're trying to make the other person see the value in hiring you. And I think that does matter. And until the deal is done, like Runam said, I think you have to keep at it. Richa, your thoughts?
No, no, absolutely resonate with what Poonam said. So the idiom that I always go with is put as many irons as you can in the fire. So it has to be, it cannot be a linear process.
Right. Right. I mean, just one very specific question. Maybe this is, I'm just trying to like, really emphasize maybe the challenge that a person in Don's shoes might be experiencing, which is that do you explain this when you're, let's say, going into interviews and you've already had maybe 6 month gap because you've been interviewing but not closing? Do you just, and you get asked by the fourth organization you're interviewing with saying, hey, see the 6 month gap, what's going on? Why have you not been able to land a job? Would you share the details that, hey, I've been applying but not really landed a role? Um, or would you position it in a different way? How would you tactfully kind of address that question?
I mean, I would honestly, and I've done this, so I will say it. I would firstly say that at this stage in my career, I'm being very deliberate about where I want to go next. And in my honest opinion, you should be deliberate at this stage in your career about where you're going next. I've got two, three, whatever conversations that are happening in parallel. I'm talking to them. Two of them are warm. One of them seems to have, not really moving forward. And I'm also talking to you. I'm most keen on XYZ role, XYZ job. Obviously, that has to be the one that you're currently talking to for XYZ reason. But, obviously it's been 6 months, and I'd like to, move fast.
All
Arjun,
right.
one thing that I'd like
People
to,
are reading between the
yeah.
lines. No one is an idiot. You're reading between the lines, but, you've still said what you had to say tactfully.
Tactfully. I think that is a tactful answer. I think it's being strategically honest. That you're not being,
Yeah.
extremely like shooting yourself in the foot by saying, oh no, I got rejected or something like that. And simultaneously, you're also explaining why the process has gone on for so long. I think that's very nice. Richa?
I just wanted to add one more thing. It's also about, you know, my own choices as the person who's being recruited, and to be very very honest, though now I've been in this position as consulting as a co-founder for several years, but many times it's almost like being a candidate when you're going when you are going for picking up a project, and many times you don't want to pick it up. There could be there could be a gap in the cultural fitment, there could be a gap in the value alignment. And yes, I think even the candidates go through this. I'm sure Dawn, I mean, absolutely adding to what Runam is saying, yes, be very candid about it, but there could probably be chances where the candidate experience itself wasn't so great, and the candidate himself or herself also cooled off. So being very candid, giving a holistic picture is what really works. And many times rejections are not because you are not competent technically. Sometimes it's just not a good match.
Yeah.
which is not so, somebody who is technically very competent may not be a good match for organization A, and it is in the best interest for both of them not to pursue the journey. But so it is no, even if it's not worked out in two, three, four places, it's not, it's not a noose around your neck, or it's not a this thing that no, you're not competent. So that's important to remember also.
Right. No, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing all these great insights. We have one last question. I know we've just kind of overshot our time here, but do we have time for just one last question, Richa and Bruno? Yeah. Okay. Bruno? Yeah. Okay, great. So we have a question here from Durba, and I will just put that up on the screen. Um, how do organizations define a career gap? If someone's been consulting or freelancing and now looking at full-time roles, would that be considered a career gap? Meaning freelancing and independent consulting, I assume. In that regard, I think almost every one of us has been on a career gap in some form or fashion, if we consider that. But I'm interested in both of your thoughts. Runam, you want to take that one first?
Sure. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't personally define consulting or freelancing as a career gap, assuming you're able to demonstrate what you've done in that time, right? Like, we have Richa here, who's technically been independently working on her own thing for the last 15 years. It's probably been the most rewarding part of her career, I'm guessing. But I'm sure she'll validate it in a few minutes. So yeah, to me, freelancing and consulting is not a career gap, assuming you've really been freelancing and consulting and aren't really just writing consultant on your profile for the lack of uh, knowing what to do in the gap, and sort of projecting that you've been freelancing or consulting when you've not actually been doing that. That is a no-no, because 5 minutes into the interview, an astute interviewer, and if they're interviewing you, they are astute, let's assume that, they will know that you're sort of trying to exaggerate your competency or your experience, and that's a terrible way to begin the process, right? It's better to say that I haven't done anything, or I took a career gap for personal reasons, or if you really are consulting, then be able to demonstrate what you did in that time.
All right. Richa, we'll get your thoughts and we'll start to wrap things up.
Yeah, so Durba, I would look at it as an entrepreneurial foray. And, as somebody sitting on the other side, I would view it very positively that you've been entrepreneurial about it. You are trying to set up something. And that's how you may want to label it as well. At the same time, why this thing emerged for you? Why, was it a well thought out thing that you want to start something, experiment, start a consulting firm of your own, or so it might have happened by design when you planned, or by default because you had to take a break. In either case, I would look at it as an entrepreneurial foray, and you may like to label it accordingly. And not every entrepreneur is successful, but then it demonstrates your risk-taking capability, your ability to stick your neck out, look for better opportunities, and it would be viewed very positively, because that's what we look for in people. We say that we want entrepreneurs. So that's how I would look at it.
Amazing. All right. So that was terrific. Thank you to both of you for sharing all your wealth of insights, stories, experiences. One of the most important topics, not just today, I think it's going to become more and more important in the future. I think, career trajectories are becoming more and more personalized, more non-linear in nature. And gaps are going to become, I think, part of almost every single person's career trajectory as organizations start to restructure and lay off more frequently. It will happen. So I think whatever we have discussed today, I think a lot of it will stay relevant even for foreseeable future. And I think you shared your lived experience and it really showed. So thank you. I appreciate it. I'm sure our audience does too. And thanks to everybody who joined us today. Took some time out on a Thursday evening. I hope you got some practical, actionable insights that you can implement, and do share whatever you learned perhaps with folks in your network, on your LinkedIn, if you think it might be relevant for them. And in case you're looking to re-enter the workforce, looking for one-on-one support and feedback on how to do it in the most effective manner, please do check out Pivot. We are at mypivot.work. You can connect directly with folks like Richa and Runa, who bring tremendous amount of experience. And what they have shared today, even though it felt like they must have shared everything, believe me, when you get on these one-on-one sessions, it becomes much more personalized to you specifically and your background and goals. So do check it out, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much again for joining. I hope everybody has a great rest of their evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Arjun. Thank you, Runam.